Today's topic, as Professor Ganesh just briefed about, it's a shifting sense, a case for sustainable financing. Honestly, if you ask me, it's quite melancholic kind of a topic. Lot of issues around climate change, a lot of things which are not so great are getting accelerated. Having said so, I thought, why not splash some colors out this? So my zoomness was all about the colors that I wanted to change the tone of this whole topic around. And in addition to that, I'm sure you will see, I've prepared a small presentation. This presentation is just to take the attention off me and on the screen. And a lot of colors have been splashed around just to kind of kill the boredom of a topic like this. But here I go. I am little Zoom challenged, so I'm trying to see how do I put my, well, can I share the screen, I think, right? Great. I hope all of you guys can hear me clearly and you can see the presentation also.
Yes, Mohit.
Wonderful. Thanks. So shifting sense, it is not at all representative of the region that I am in, but that's a separate topic. Few hygiene points which I just want to put across out here. One, I'm here as an alumni of IIM Indore, not at all representing any organizations out here. Lot of the research, lot of the things that you will see on the slides, with due acknowledgement, I have taken from the public sources. So it essentially means that if you really Google a little bit of things, you will find most of those things online. So it's not a proprietary research that I have done, but since I'm interested in a topic like this, I have been reading about it. And in our jobs also, we have some exposure to things like this. So that's where we are. What do we do today? So we will talk the two big items. We will sketch a landscape in terms of what we are talking about. Honestly, this is a huge field. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you just noticed the few colors which I have artificially splashed out here, the greens and the funnels and all. Why this funnel is so important? This is a top-down approach. This is a thing that we need to understand in the vastness of the subject, then try and see whether we can drill down on a very small cog in a wheel, which is sustainable financing. So we'll talk about what sustainable financing is all about, what's happening around of late on this. When we come to sustainable financing, why so much hangama? Itna drama kyun? Kitna kyun bolte ho? Let's find out why we need to act now. We will touch upon a little bit in terms of what actually in practice in the industry, how these things are being tackled. And finally, we will see where we are headed. So without further ado, let's look at this slide. I have just actually splashed few of the words on this slide, but it is extremely critical to pay a little bit of attention, spend a little bit of time on this. I have kind of categorized them. What are the environmental issues that we are talking about? By the way, ESG is nothing but environmental, social, and governance. It is a nice way of kind of putting the bigger challenges that the industry is facing, the world is facing, and how do we kind of put them into a easy slogan? So ESG has come about, but E in itself is a subject, S and G again. So if you look at, I will actually come to the environment in the last. Let's look at what the social is all about. Are we being justified in what we do? Is there a health and safety being compromised in the places? And by the way, I work in an international place, and I can see the different culture, the melting pot that we have here, the kind of disparities sometimes do we have. Is it a problem that we need to solve? The answer is loud yes. Look at the governance. Anti-bribery and corruption. I'm sure a lot of you would have been looking at the development of this medical healthcare company, Theranos. Huge amount of issues going on around this. How do we manage this governance? Although the governance could be at any level, primarily when we talk about governance, more often than not, we are talking about a very higher level thing in terms of the countries, in terms of the regions and things like that. Transparency, modern slavery. I think this is an important word, modern slavery, which is something which is an elephant in the room as far as the G piece of this ESG is concerned. And all of us need to possibly wake up to these realities and see what all in our small habitats we can do about it. Coming back to the really elephant in the room, which is the environment. We have been doing what we have been doing to our planet for decades and centuries, maybe. I think it's time, if you don't wake up, I will possibly take you through that melancholy of not so great things, saying, where are we headed? And if we don't do something, if we don't act now, where are we ended up? I'll take you a little bit back, saying where all of this originated. What you see right now on the screen is something called United Nations SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals is an attempt by United Nations plus another 180, 190 countries which are part of the UN to harmonize a little bit of saying, when we talk about climate change, when we talk about no poverty, when we talk about gender equality, what are we talking about? So we have been trying, the UN along with its participants under the SDGs have been trying to define what are those 17, 16, 17 different big picture goals. Actually, many of them are E's or S's or G's. I mean, if you look at the color coding of these SDGs, they represent a specific color. So you will see a few greens and few blues around, which is a kind of culmination of how these few colors talk to each other in terms of bringing those goals around. On the left, you see the big picture item, the big circle is the UN SDGs. We need to be working, the whole industry, the whole world, the whole financial fraternity needs to work towards this. I have narrowed it down a little bit to say sustainability in ESG. By the way, SDGs, if you look at the SDGs, they talk a lot about marine diversity also, biodiversity is also, which may or may not be easily be categorized in the ESGs or sustainability, zero hunger, no poverty. There are a lot of other things which are beyond this kind of golden thing and in the more chocolate color. And these are the adaptation for the environmental, economic and climate benefit, what is all being doing. Then it comes to the small piece of it. I mean, I've actually purposely, because from the finance industry, so I've just made it bigger. But actually, this is a very small dot in terms of what's going to happen in this world. Green financing is looking beyond what's happening. I have defined sustainability. I've defined what ESG is. What am I doing about it? So I'm looking at from the lens or a tinge of a financial industry and trying to possibly figure out what this industry can do. There are bigger pollutants. There are industries in which the transition is still not happening. Every industry has woken up to this idea and they're actually working towards doing this. The prevention of pollution. We're not talking about the reduction of pollution. It's a prevention. I mean, what new technologies can come in to kind of do a lot of those things. Where it all start? Although I've been, I started it from 2015 when this 16, 17 sustainability SDGs that came out. But if you remember Kyoto Protocol in 1995, which started. And that was the beginning of a realization of a fact that if you do not act now, it may be too late. A lot has happened since then. I'm sure you would have heard about the COP26, which happened in Glasgow in December. We have started COPs since 2001. It's a committees of parties which come together. All these countries who are part of the United Nations, they come together and try and figure out what should be done as far as the SDGs are concerned. Since 1995, we have been talking about it. There has been a lot of debate in terms of the industrialized, non-industrialized nations to see why should I pay for you, or why should I stop when you already developed? I'm sure if you do a little bit of Googling, you will see the problems that we are facing in terms of coming to a common agenda and trying to see how do we mitigate the threat that all of us have. I think Paris Climate Agreement in 2016 was one of the watershed events in which everybody almost kind of in one form or shape agreed that if we do not act now, if the global warming goes beyond 2 degrees Celsius, a lot could happen in terms of, maybe we have read and heard a lot about the level of water going up, the volcanoes. I mean, you can actually see what's going on in terms of the change in the climate, the change in the environment, the typhoons, the intensity of the typhoons has gone up, the sea water temperature has gone up. A lot of those things in the time to come are going to be extremely catastrophic. Are we late in attempting that? The answer is yes and no. but we need to change, and we need to really change fast. So Paris Climate Agreement came about with a lot of hope in this industry to see that, yeah, actually we have woken up and we are doing things about it. The biggest culprit in doing some of these things had been some of the industrialized nations also. Moving on, European Union, possibly to my mind, has been the pioneers in terms of acknowledging that, yes, we are on the wrong side of things. We need to do something. So they have been EU guidelines in terms of what those sustainable principles are going to be, what we should be doing as far as the climate change is concerned. What do we, how transparent are we? So the fostering all of these things has been what EU has actually championed. On the right, there are a few flags. It was not a quiz in terms of which country is which flag, but I put India in the top, but India has been seriously lagging in terms of, but at least they've woken up. They are doing few things around. So India came out with something called National Action Plan for Climate Change. To my mind, it's still in the books only. It needs to kind of get alive. But other countries, the biggest culprit sometimes that we feel about China and all, I mean, there's a humongous amount of effort being put in across to see how the next phase of industrialization is actually more compliant towards Paris climate or the COPs that we keep doing around. Why this topic gained a lot of attention from my side was simply because COP28 is actually happening in UAE. And there's a huge amount of positivity in the system to see how can we make that dent and how can we make that change. I've put a small thing saying it's time to act for the planet. I mean, I think I don't want to really emphasize beyond a point, but this is so critical that all of us need to a little bit of help as far as the planet is concerned. I have Ramesh also in the crowd right now who's listening to me. And we had a wonderful discussion, Professor Ganesh, we had a wonderful discussion in the morning in which Ramesh had a choice to choose our electricity and water bill. One of them would be generated by fossil fuel, and another would be generated in a slightly more green manner. And I'm so happy and proud to say that Ramesh actually chose the other one. So there is a awareness as far as the climate change is seeping into, and I think it is gaining momentum. Too small, too micro, don't even bother reading it. I'll just tell you what to look into this. Why are we making so much of a hungama around this? I mean, what's going on? On the left side is 2007. This is World Economic Forum, 2007. What are the top global risks in terms of the likelihood? If you just look at the color coding on the left side, most of them are the blues. Blues was the economic impact of the things. What is the global risk? And let's not forget 2007, 2008, 2009, GFC, all of us have sailed through that. We have seen what happened during those times. So obviously it was a top of the mind recall. It was a problem. Just look around what happens from 2009, 10, 11 onwards. The green, which is actually the environmental piece, is coming to the fore. It's too micro for you to read, but just focus on what is happening in 2020. Top 5 risks that the world is going to face, the global risks, are all green. In some other way or the other, natural disasters or biodiversity issues or climate change issues, but color coding, look at that color. And what is the likely impact going to because of all these things? Look at again the right side of it. The last one is mostly called the societal, the water scarcity. I mean, it's a huge issue. I mean, enough and more has been told about the next war possibly would be because of water. So the green on the right is a representative of an acknowledgement of an issue that the world faces today. Again, too small for you to read. This is a chart for a likelihood on the x-axis and impact on the y-axis. Look at the circle that I have done. Those are the green climate-related economic issue, environmental issues which are going to pose the risk, which is a continuation of what we saw in the last slide. Look how far on the right we are approaching. All those risks that 10 years, 12 years back used to be at the top of our agenda, they're all somewhere in between. I mean, they are risks, obviously, but nothing like what we see on the right-hand corner at the top. So I think if you just look at these two things, it is so important that we need to do something about it. So this Hungama is not just a farce. I mean, actually, it's a problem. Okay, more melancholy around. Look what's going to happen. Look at this chart. I mean, this is a chart that I can actually spend half a day on. If you do not act, look at the graph where it is going. Most of us have done our statistics in SPSSs. Look at this green kind of this band that you see here. You act, possibly you change the direction a little bit. You don't act, most you're going in a direction which clearly is very warm. Earlier, we kept talking, UN kept talking about 2%, 2 degrees Celsius increase in the temperature is going to be catastrophic. Look at the orange line now, we have 1.5. If we do not act now, 1.5 is not far off. We are in 2022, another 17, 18 years. And actually, it's not that bad in news because there is a recognition of a problem and people are actually working towards doing something about it. But it's a human-induced warming. We, all of us have done this. So this is a post-industrialization. What is going on in terms of the warming? Very sad affairs in terms of if you really start taking note of this or start reading and understanding more about it, saying that possibly many of us may not be around, but the next generation is actually, we are not doing well for them, to my mind. What is the finance industry doing about it? What is actually sustainable financing? So sustainable financing simply says that we would expressly look at non-financial attributes of a company while we make our risk decisions. And that specifically would be what we have been talking about, the E and S and Gs. We need to make these ESG considerations as a part of our decision making. Although today I'm just focusing on sustainable financing, but since morning, as Professor Ganesh, I was telling on the group that we had a lot of buzz around. We talked a lot about in terms of the investments. Where is the investment going? It's $140 trillion industry, out of which almost 1/3 is today ESG. Many of you would be investing using a lot of different apps. There is an impact rating for every investment in the stock market that we have done so far. So there's a lot of recognition to put that dashboard in front of you to take some action. And there are people, thankfully, people like Ramesh who are taking those actions. The big picture, the big cogs in the wheels are these multinational sovereigns, municipal authorities who have the power and the will and possibly an inclination towards doing some of these things. And they are participating on the sustainable financing in a very big way. Banks and financial institutions on these agencies are at the forefront in terms of trying to change doing a course correction in many ways in terms of how these lending decisions are done, how these investment decisions are being done, how the asset allocation happens. What is the relevance? I mean, I won't spend really too much time because I've spoken about a few of those things. As I was saying, Paris Climate Agreement was a watershed. Why? Because we were clearly lagging from 1995 onwards. We just didn't do anything. There was a realization there is a huge investment which is needed into this kind of an industry. Otherwise, we are doomed. As I said, EU and Asian countries, I mean, they have really done. And by the way, EU and Asia put together is a decent part of the globe or the climate that we are talking about. And some of the Asian countries are not one of the most industrialized countries, but some of the great countries like South Korea, Japan, China, India, all of us are trying to kind of push the envelope a little bit better towards getting into those achieving SDG goals. Most important thing is, last but one, the non-ESG strategic players to find it extremely difficult to finance. And this is what I live day in, day out. Every time I am looking at an annual report of a company, I think increasingly, the first thing that I want to look at is what is the ESG strategy of the company? Where are they investing? There are banks around who cannot touch the industries which have something or the other to do with non-compliance of ESGs. Regulators are also taking note of it. There is just time where a lot of these things are getting into a regulatory scrutiny. Green and sustainable would become an end thing in terms of how well a country, how well a corporate, how well an agency is rated going forward. Sever this graph. I mean, this is this is what is happening around, and this is called the awakening. 2013, the whole of this social GESS we say, so it's a green, sustainable, social, economic, all these green bonds, sustainability linked bonds, social bonds. Look at the growth from a 27 billion US in 2013, from a 146 billion in 2016 when the Paris Agreement was done, to 2020, which is 730 odd. And I'm so happy when I say this, 2021, we were more than 1.3 or 1.4 trillion dollars. Although there are enough and more studies which talk about 2.5 trillion US dollars which have been gone into this. Sometimes it's all about how you actually say what is sustainable, what is not sustainable. A lot of these things need to be ironed out. So look at the growth. Look at these things are being brought into the mainstream, and that's how the contrast between how a traditional financing and how a sustainable financing are actually looking eye to eye right now. Although the market is really big, huge things to capture for us. There are a few industries which are called the transition industries, cement, steel. These are difficult industries in which you really you won't be able to do too much into sustainability, and these are things that you require. But then we saw a term called decarbonization. So there are enough and more ways. Okay, I know I can't do anything about it, but can I offset it by doing something good, something somewhere else? So I think those are also counter thoughts which are also coming in. Look at the instruments which are being used in the industry. This is very specific to the industry, so I wouldn't bore you beyond a point, but look at the kind of span that we are covering. We have green bonds. Just 30 seconds on what is a green and what is sustainable. Green is simple, that if I give money to a company, would it go for green purposes, non-polluting purposes? We gave money to a waste management company, and the waste management company is working out of South Africa. South Africa regulation says that you cannot put even a milligram of mercury into the landfill. And these guys says, give us XYZ $1 million as a green bond, and we will actually work on putting up a small plant so that the segregation can happen. That's the kind of money which goes into the green. Sustainability, oil and gas companies. Oil and gas companies says, okay, I have to run a refinery, but I can tell you something. I'm going to reduce my greenhouse gas emissions. GHG emissions would go down. Oh, by the way, because a refinery is a continuous process plant, I need to have electricity which needs to be generated. Can I make a move from a fossil fuel based electricity generation to a more renewable, more sustainable kind of power generation? Can I actually reduce the wastewater? Can I recycle those water? A lot of these things are not green, but there is a corporate which is trying hard to be sustainable, to try and improve upon a lot of those parameters that they have not been so great at in past. Challenges, I think we do not have, I mean, many of us are finance guys. Professor Ganesh is here. IFRS has set up very nicely saying, how do I read a balance sheet? What comes in, goes out, asset, cash flow, balance sheet. There is standardization. We have yet not gone to the place where there is a streamlining of what are disclosure on a financial side and what are disclosure on the non-financial parameters are going to be. If you look at the annual reports of 5 or 6 big companies, I mean, oil and gas example or cement companies, you will see that there is a disclosure on the non-financial side, but not at all in the same standard. It's not comparable. Let's put it this way. When I was talking about McKinsey says $2.3 trillion have gone into sustainable loans over the period of time in 2021. My graph was saying only $1.5 trillion. What's the difference? Why? Exactly because there is no common definition today. But IFRS has actually come up with, they are set up a board which is looking into the non-financial disclosures and trying to do what could be a common platform in which we do these things. Greenwashing. I mean, in the morning in the group, we were talking about evergreening. So evergreening, a lot of us know evergreening is all about, don't repay me, at the maturity, I will roll over your loan, don't worry. What is greenwashing? Greenwashing is something like an advertising guys would know that a green label on the bottle, which has nothing green into it, could be a misnomer. I mean, it's something which is not true, but has been advocated as true. Banks, financial institutions, governments, they need to be extremely critical and wary about these greenwashing issues, in which our financing is raised for an X amount, X kind of thing, and then that money actually finds its way somewhere else. So greenwashing is simply to say, no misleading, nothing misleading. The money would be used for the use of purpose is exactly why this money has been given to you. Then I think two quick things in terms of the other two challenges is a lot of abbreviations which I've used purposely to misguide you guys, nevertheless. Financing specific risk. What is SPTs? Sustainable performance targets. How much? I'm going to reduce the greenhouse gas emission in my company. Okay, by how much? Okay, yesterday I was 10 gigajoules per tons, and tomorrow I would be 12. Is it challenging enough? Are we setting up the KPIs in a manner which is more ambitious? Or you will see. I mean, I'm sure if you peel the surface, you will see a lot of people say that I would change my GHGs from the level where I am today to a different level. And then there are greenwashing guys who say, oh, in 1900, when my company was established, I was at this level, and now I will get to this level. This is a problem which we are facing in the industry in terms of, are we serious about it? So as a financier, we look at these SPTs very critically. We say that these targets needs to be ambitious. When somebody says that I'm going to reduce my water recycling, they jolly well mean it, and they mean it in a proper manner. Why? Because these financings actually are a beneficial financings. The interest rates are less, the covenants are different, simply to encourage people, to encourage the corporates to actually take that money and put it for the right usage. SPOs is like your Moody's and the S&Ps of the world. It's the second party opinions. There are a couple of companies which have come up very recognized, Sustainalytics, which is one of the Morningstar companies. They give sustainability ratings to the company saying, oh, you said you will do X, Y, and Z. Are you doing it or not? That's one audit. And another thing that they talk about is whether your goals are ambitious enough or not. I'll take a pause here and just quickly summarize in terms of we looked at what this whole landscape is all about. Why so much hoopla around it? And we clearly see that if we do not change the way things are moving, we are heading towards a not so glorious future. Financing industry has taken a note of it. Financing industry is actually penalizing the companies which are not great on ESG, who are not focusing much on the ESG. In addition to that, the development that we have, the kind of loan printing which is happening as far as the ESG is concerned is humongous. It's doubling and tripling every year. And I think after this COP26, Paris Accord and all, the North is just huge North in terms of the kind of investment which is going into it. I didn't touch upon, as I said earlier, on the investment side of it, but on the investment side, trillions and trillions, $53 trillion is what the expectation is. By 2025, we would have $25 trillion, $53 trillion actually into the industry which are ESG compliant. So the people who have money, the sovereign wealth funds, the family offices, everybody who has funds, they are very aggressively and potently looking at putting their money for the right use. Maybe compromising a little bit in terms of the returns, but I think it's a great move that people are looking at the sustainable aspect of it. I think I'll stop here. I have a few examples, and in case time permits, I can just take you through one or two which are close to my heart. Professor Ganesh, do you have 2 minutes to just talk about?
Yeah, please go ahead, and then after that we'll take questions.
Thanks. So we were looking at a marine industry. And we said, why don't we try and fund a vessel? All the approvals, everything else was done. And one smart bloke in the risk department just said, hang on. So what kind of fuel are these guys using? He said, the ships use the bunker fuel. He said, that's polluting. Yeah, that's polluting. So everybody else uses that. He said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not approving this. To a mundane thing like The fuel, and by the way, I mean, a marine vessel actually works on bunker fuel. And the client came back to us and saying, guys, I mean, you knew from the day zero that bunker fuel is what is used. So why did you even come this far? What did we do? We actually financed the yard where next ship was being built out for the same client. And we actually invested money with a company which actually changed the design of the propeller of the ship so that the consumption of the bunker fuel drops by at least 25 to 30%. This is exactly what I was talking about, the transition industry. There are a few things that you can't wish away, but can I do something to reduce the impact? Another thing is about, I was talking about decarbonization. Carbon offsetting. Carbon offsetting is a huge word right now. There are exchanges running into trillions. And carbon offsetting is all about that. I know I'm in an industry which I can't do beyond a point too much, but hey, let me do something good somewhere else. Let me buy these carbons, because these carbons, you know, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all of these big companies, they are actually dealing in billions of dollars in terms of buying and selling and netting off their carbon offsets. Every Amazon delivery that comes to you has a carbon footprint. What is Amazon doing about it? They actually go buy the carbon credits and offset every delivery boy that comes to your house. So I think a lot of new age companies, they have taken note of it. They have actually, so please, sometimes we say that they have done phenomenally well for themselves in terms of thinking about that there is a problem that we need to solve. I would just leave you with a small thought saying, in our daily lives, I mean, maybe at some stage I will talk you through what a carbon footprint calculator is. Every step, every part of the life that you do, every delivery that comes to you, every plastic bag that you use, every milk box Tetra Pak pack that comes to you, everything has a carbon footprint. Let's see what's the best way. We can't avoid, we understand, but what's the best way so that we can reduce our personal carbon footprints. Soon a time is going to come, and when I say time is going to come, mark my words, 6 months, in which when you are actually at the POS and trying to pay something on the till of a company, you will actually have a little bit of charge asked to you saying, are you okay to put in 2 rupees for sustainable park? Why? Because to deliver this to you here at your convenience, we have actually done a lot of carbon emissions, so we need to offset that. And this is coming. It's all going to be automated. APIs are being drafted in which they will figure out how much every activity kind of contributes to the CO2, and they will try and offset that. So I'll leave that with the thought. It's quite a melancholic kind of a topic, but I think I want you to read a lot about it. Try and see if you could educate few other people in terms of what we are doing to our climate and how do we really move differently. And Professor Ganesh, there are enough and more universities in West and EU also specifically, where there are courses on sustainable financing, green financing, or rather sustainability. Financing is just a part, very small cog in the wheel of sustainability debate. But there are courses. I think our Planet I should also, if I'm not sure, but if we are not doing anything on that part, but that could be one of those courses that could be possibly thought about, because this is a need that we need to solve for. Thank you so much. Very, very patient people. Nobody disturbed me in between. Otherwise, I would have lost my momentum. But here I'm. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for the patient listening. I'm
so
okay.
Now open for questions. So please raise your hand electronically, and then Mohit can take your questions.
Whoever is writing on the chat, let me see if I could read them, because I am not so great. So how is financing handled for a conglomerate which might be investing on new renewable energy, for example, solar park, but at the same time has a large footprint of the non-renewable? Wonderful, wonderful. I think great question, Dipendra. This is exactly what financing companies are today doing. Would a coal mine company pass my case? No. But does that mean that I should penalize them for not doing the right thing? That's also a big no. So green financing is specifically trying to, and by the way, these companies who have this kind of businesses do a lot in terms of segregating the renewable and non-renewable businesses in their own setup and their own legal structures. And the kind of funding and financing which could be done on the renewable side is done in a very separate, arm's length manner, and a huge amount of scrutiny, huge amount of audit which goes through into this. So I think what you just wrote about is something which is happening. We cannot penalize the people who are actually trying to do the right thing. So yes, the answer is definitely there is a lot which is happening on the side. How is the UN dividing the onus among the developing and the developed? Wonderful. What a great debate this is. The developed countries have exploited all the resources potentially. Okay, wonderful. I think this is the question for a parliament or a United Nations General Assembly. But I should tell you something. I mean, when the world is talking about 2030, I'm in the region which is the biggest oil and gas producers, the Middle East, the GCC. Abu Dhabi says 2030, I want to go to net zero. 2040, Saudi says, I want to go to net zero. They are so dependent on the resources that they have, which is fossil fuel. Why is India need to say 2070? I understand the whole issue around developed versus developing nations. Don't use the word exploiting. Why do you want to exploit? I'll give a wonderful example, Sagar, on this. Reliance Industries. Lalaji company, they have made bloody profits like there's no tomorrow. Reliance Industries has poured in the billion, I think you can Google this, billions of dollars into their refining business, on their oil and gas business, to turn, if not green, at least a blue or a brown, which is better than the black that we have today. Huge amount of investment is going into Reliance Industries, and I can tell you, this is going to be one of the most valuable companies in India. It's already there, but it would be most valuable company, not only on the returns aspect of it, but on the ESG aspect of it. When everybody else would wake up to the reality that which is gaping into their eyes, this is the company which would have moved ahead already and trying to do a lot of things which are right for the planet. The Reliance Industries that you see today is not going to be the same company in few years' time, because the kind of focus that this company has in terms of turning the browns to the blues and the blues to the greens, and completely trying to see if they can ward off. And by the way, let's not forget, they're oil and gas companies, they're petrochemical companies. Despite all of that, they are taking huge strides in trying to do this. So I think the issue around developed and developing nations, I think it's a will, it's a political will. We need to kind of get on a same platform like everybody else. I don't know, where is China? China is developed. My friend Ramesh can tell me more about it, but China is doing huge investment, guys, huge investment into a thing like this. Why would India cry foul every time and say 2070? Why is the National Action Plan Climate Change Committee sleeping? I'm not here to bash all of these things, but all I'm trying to say is that enough political will, enough will in the industry, enough will in the financing industry, in the asset management places, all of these things needs to come together. The R&D, the technology, everybody needs to work together so that maybe 2070 is the target, but we can finish it at least 15, 20 years earlier. So the debate will continue. I think this is a very valid debate, but I wouldn't say that, oh, because you did it, so I will also do it. I don't think that works this way. No, not today. It's not in a great shape. Do I have, thanks. In India, there are companies which talked a lot about renewable resources, low energy, just an example, but they are not flying. Just imagine, Ernest, are they any? Okay, good. I think I purposely wouldn't do the India bashing out here. But since all of us are sitting there, ये जुगाड़ economy है ना हमारी, ये जो जुगाड़ चलता है, this needs to just go off. And it needs to start with our generation, it needs to start with the next generation. I was doing a project with a company in which we were supposed to distribute their CSR budget. It's a regulatory requirement, CSR budget needs to be distributed. And this guy comes and he's a bloody billionaire. He comes and says, अच्छा मैंने अपनी ना family में drivers को सबको ना injection लगवाए हैं vaccination. यार इसको भी तुम CSR में डाल दो ना. I mean, if we are so parochial in terms of thinking what gets categorized as CSR, that means we just don't have that will to move ahead. And India, I'm just giving an example because we talk it, it's relevant to all of us. But this is a thread which is very common to a lot of the developing companies. At the expense of climate, at the expense of being on the right side of the regulators, people are just doing anything and everything. Suzlon is a case I've personally dealt with them. Suzlon was the case of, as somebody, as Manish rightly put, it's about being real and being about honest in terms of, they just didn't manage their finances properly, to my mind. That's a beautiful case of being in the right industry in the right time, but goofing up. But I'm sure these guys will come back. India is an important considering the contribution they have to make. Manish, I think this is one of the elephants in the room. India, China, another 10 most polluting countries. If all of these guys just don't get together and act in the rightful manner, do I have all the answers in terms of what they should be doing? No, I mean, there are different levels in which discussions are happening. The most worrying part of all of this is we are not possibly investing enough wherewithal into doing R&D, into putting the technology to the right use. I mean, enough and more has been said about India here. I wouldn't really drag it further, but I think I have to reassure you also, India is one of those countries which are taking very, very active steps. They have been extremely agile in terms of thinking about how do we do the offsetting, what is the right way of doing things. Soon you will see there are regulations which are going to come in place, and there will be agencies who would actually monitor whether those things are happening or not. As I said earlier, I think ours is the generation, next generation is the people who need to start thinking about this now and act accordingly. I think India is an elephant in the room, and I would say late, but we have woken up. We are doing lot of right things, lot of good things in terms of getting to the point where Paris Accord wants us to be. The reporting disclosure in India is still at an early stage. Apart from SBI current disclosure regulation, unlike the developed countries, the regulations strictly enforced and companies require ESG reports and so on disclosure. The question to consider is, if the disclosure in India is still not clear, how can sustainable financing be disclosed or adopted? Wonderful. I mean, awesome. Very nice question. I'm so pleased, Minali. Thanks for asking this question. भाई, जिस कंट्री में हम जीएसटी लगाने में साल लगा देते हैं, 20 साल लगा देते हैं, जहां पे हम आधार कार्ड बनाने के बाद आधार कार्ड को कुछ यूज नहीं करते हैं, आई थिंक दिस इज द चेंज दैट नीड्स टू बी ब्रॉट अबाउट एट द grassroots levels. As I was giving the example of this CSR budget, somebody trying for the injection also to be counted there. This is exactly the problem. And if you looked at what I talked about in one of the slides in terms of challenges, is there is no commonality, there is no common standards. IFRS is there, which tells you what to do when there is a cash flow, whether it goes which part of the balance sheet does it go to. Is there something on the non-financial attributes of a company? The answer is today no. But the good thing which is going to happen, Nali, is that lot of these agencies, you mentioned SEBI, for example, but there are other agencies which are also working towards putting those frameworks in place in which, and by the way, we shouldn't forget that many of these companies, if they really want to raise financing in the global markets, if they really want their ratings to be there in the global markets, they jolly well start doing what you've written out here. And actually, this is the change which will happen either by will or by putting pressures from different places. Financing is just one small part of the pressure point, that pain point that we have, but the regulations that will come in terms of the level of pollution that you're allowed to do, shifting of the industries from one place to another. I think there are a lot which is being thought about. We yet do not see the implementation of those things, but I think time is ripe. There are companies which have taken note of it. Today, there are 4 paragraphs as far as ESG is concerned. I think soon it would be 4 pages. And I think we all need to contribute towards that. Whichever company that we work for, whichever courses we have taken, if you're a student today, I think it's very critical, very important that we start drawing attention towards these things also.
Mohit, I believe a lot of points which you mentioned, let me just point out something. You've mentioned a lot of drawbacks within India per se, but I believe a lot of good things have happened because of our upbringing. I may not have traveled too far and wide, but I still know of people who have huge mansions running on centralized heating and centralized air conditioning. I, for one reason, chose to send my kids to a non-AC school. But for some of you, especially NRIs who have been fortunate enough to be living outside India, and then talking in not so good terms about what things happen in India, I believe many of these things have not happened because of the reason that these policies have been drafted by people who've been huge energy guzzlers, especially for people in, let's say, the Middle East, especially for people in European Union, right? Especially for people in US, huge energy guzzlers, and you making policies and still not cutting down on your energy consumptions. I seriously don't know as to what steps have UAE or people in European Union. You spoke a lot about the people in European Union. What steps have they done actually to cut down on their huge heating bills across their mansions? I don't know. Okay. It's good to talk about companies per se, but what do you do about your personal consumptions?
Because very good question. Let me just break this question in two parts. One about India and another about what's happening outside. When was the last time that many of us have actually put our wet garbage and the dry garbage and the paper and the plastic and everything else in 5 different boxes?
मोहित वर्मा, यहाँ पे ठंड होती है, लोग रजाई लेके सोते हैं, पूरे घर में सेंट्रलाइज हीटिंग ऑन करके नहीं सोते हैं.
Let's take a step back again. I mean, you can harp on that specific point of it, but I'm just asking you that this mindset change is the first thing that many of us need to do. If I drop a garbage outside my house right now, I would be fined $1,000 right away. कर लो इंडिया में, करके दिखा दो. अरे रेड लाइट पे रुकते नहीं लोग यार. Anyways, I mean, again, I am not trying to do a India bashing story here. I have grown up there, but the point is, because it's about the mindset change. Heating bills की बात कर रहे हो भाई साहब, शिकागो में -40 डिग्री सेल्सियस टेम्परेचर है. निकल के दिखाओ ना रजाई से बाहर यार. Not easy. Heating bills need to learn. What could be different for the heating bills? You know what is happening? There's a concept called the salt towers. What are salt towers? In the good times when the sun is out, I will actually warm the oil, put it on the salt. Salt has a higher specific density that will absorb the heat. The thermal energy will be stored there, and that thermal energy would be converted into doing a lot of these things, which is an alloy of aluminium and graphite. Why? Because they can hold the heat for a longer time. Now, my point, all I'm saying is, fine, they're smaller countries. Their ability to really channelize their energies and do things is different than India. But the point is, can I just change the mindset? Would I be the guy? Can all of us say that I'm not going to use the reusable plastic ever in my life? We don't change our mindsets. We need to change. Or have I changed my mindset? Has UAE changed the mindset? I pay 10 fills every time I ask for a bag. I can afford 10 fills, so I'm happy about it. But the point here is, am I consciously saying that, oh I should have brought my bag? I'm sorry, today I forgot, but next time I will do it. Or, oh, I forgot my bag. There is a bag for 2 dirhams, $1. Can I buy it? Do I make that purchase? No, I don't make that purchase. The problem is the mindset. But if you go to Norway, if you go to Finland, you go to Sweden, you go to Denmark, you talked about EU, right? You go there, you would be drastically penalized if you just do not abide by these kind of rules. And precisely the point, and again, I mean, India is a developing nation. We are all still trying to grapple with larger issues, societal issues, than coming to environment to start with. I think sometimes environment takes a backseat. But my sense is that whatever is happening today in metros, Arvind wrote about Hyderabad and good things happening there. I think, I mean, this all needs to get percolated to every nook and corner. There are enough and more companies which are thankfully working towards making those changes. In metros, it's infrastructure which is managed nicely. But I think we need to put this whole thought beyond those 20 metro cities that we have in India into the nooks and corners. And this is what the difference possibly sometimes is in other nations. And again, those places have been doing this for a number of years, so we clearly see the difference. But all I'm urging is we have to make a start. We have to make, and enough has been done. We just need to continue the good job that we are doing.